Snow fell, thick heavy flakes. Chicago vanished under a white blanket. Streetlights became hazy orbs in the swirling snow. Out on Route 12 the snow seemed to whisper as it hit the asphalt. Derek shivered, pulling his cab driver's jacket tighter. Bad night for a fare. Derek drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. He'd been driving for hours, hoping for a late-night pickup. Anything to make the rent. The radio crackled with static, mirroring the unease in Derek's gut. He glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something staring back. Just the empty back seat, cold and leather-smelling. A flicker of movement by the roadside caught his eye. A woman, tall, dressed in a long white coat. Her hand was raised, a small suitcase at her feet. Derek hesitated. Something felt off, but a fare was a fare. He pulled up, the cab's headlights illuminating the woman's pale face. She had eyes like dark, bottomless pools. "Get in," he muttered, already regretting his decision. The woman smiled, a slow, unsettling smile, and slid into the back seat. The car filled with the scent of damp earth and something else. Something cold. She gave an address. Out past Barrington, almost to the edge of Cook County. Strange. Who'd be going that far out on a night like this? Derek tried to make small talk, break the ice, but the woman only offered short, clipped answers. Her voice was like the snow outside, quiet, insistent, and strangely chilling. "Long drive," Derek commented, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were fixed on the road ahead, unblinking. "It is," she replied, her voice a hollow whisper. The car heater seemed to struggle against the cold that emanated from her. He tried again. "Visiting family?" "Something like that," she said. Her gaze didn't waver from the road. Derek gave up. The silence in the car was heavier than the snow falling outside. The highway gave way to smaller roads, the houses thinning out until there was nothing but trees, their branches heavy with snow. They were deep into Cook County forest preserves now. Derek felt a prickle of unease. He glanced at the GPS. It was blinking erratically, the map a jumbled mess. "Seems to be having some trouble," he said, more to himself than the woman. He tapped the screen, but it remained stubbornly uncooperative. "It knows where to go," the woman said, her voice low and steady. Derek looked at her, startled. Her eyes were fixed on him now, burning with an unsettling intensity. He swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. The woods pressed in on either side of the road, the darkness seeming to swallow the headlights. The snow was falling harder now, a blinding curtain. Derek gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He felt a chill run down his spine, and it had nothing to do with the cold. The GPS suddenly sprang back to life. The screen flickered, showing a narrow dirt road snaking off into the woods. "Make a left here," the robotic voice instructed. Derek hesitated. The road looked barely passable, swallowed by snowdrifts and shadows. "You sure?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The woman simply nodded, her gaze unwavering. He took a deep breath and turned the wheel. The cab bumped and skidded down the dirt road, branches scraping against the sides. He felt like he was driving into the jaws of some unseen beast. The wind howled outside, an eerie, mournful sound. The GPS continued to direct him, deeper and deeper into the woods. He was surrounded by darkness now, the headlights barely penetrating the swirling snow. He felt a growing sense of dread, a certainty that he should turn back, but something kept him going. The woman's silence was a weight in the car, pressing down on him. Section 5. The Clearing. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the dirt road opened into a small clearing. The snow seemed to fall less heavily here, as if held back by some unseen force. In the center of the clearing, bathed in the eerie glow of the headlights, stood a solitary oak tree, its branches bare and twisted like the limbs of some ancient skeletal hand. "Stop here," the woman said. Her voice was different now, softer, almost sad. Derek brought the cab to a halt, the engine idling in the silence. He looked at the woman, his heart pounding in his chest. She was staring at the oak tree, her face pale and drawn in the dim light. "This is it?" he asked, his voice raspy. The woman nodded, but her gaze didn't waver from the tree. Derek followed her gaze, a sense of foreboding settling over him. There was something about this place, something cold and empty. He could feel it in his bones. The woman turned to him then, and for the first time Derek saw a flicker of emotion in her eyes. It wasn't fear or sadness, but something else entirely. Regret? Longing? He couldn't be sure. "He never saw it coming," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Her words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Derek frowned, confused. "Who?" he asked, his voice catching in his throat. The woman didn't answer. She just stared at him, her eyes filled with a strange, unsettling light. Then, she reached out and placed a cold hand on his arm. "Be careful," she whispered, her voice filled with a strange urgency. Before Derek could respond, she opened the car door and stepped out into the snow. The cold hit him like a physical blow. He watched as the woman walked towards the oak tree, her white coat blending into the falling snow. He wanted to call out to her, to ask her what she meant, but something held him back. He watched as she reached the tree and paused, her hand resting on its rough bark. Then she was gone. One moment she was there. The next, she was swallowed by the swirling snow, as if she had never existed at all. Derek stared at the spot where she had been standing, his mind reeling. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, but she was gone, vanished. He scrambled out of the cab, his heart pounding in his chest. "Hello?" he called out, his voice swallowed by the wind. "Hello?" Only the sound of the falling snow answered him. He walked towards the oak tree, his boots crunching in the snow. There was no sign of the woman, no footprints, nothing. It was as if she had simply ceased to be. Derek noticed something caught in the rough bark of the oak tree, a flash of yellowed paper. He pulled at it, a newspaper clipping, old and brittle, the edges brown with age. The headline swam into focus: "Fatal car accident claims young couple on snowy night." The accompanying photo showed a mangled wreck, barely recognizable as a car. He read the date, January 11th, 20 years ago. Tonight. The blood drained from Derek's face as he read the article. The young couple had been driving home from a party, lost control of their car on the icy road, and crashed into this very oak tree. The driver had been killed instantly. The passenger, a young woman. Derek's breath caught in his throat. He looked at the spot where the woman in white had vanished, his heart pounding in his chest. The article mentioned the passenger's name, Sarah. Sarah, who had been wearing a white dress that night. Sarah, who had always loved this particular stretch of road, who had begged her boyfriend to drive this way even though it was out of their way. Sarah, who had died on impact, her body never recovered from the wreckage. Derek stumbled back from the tree, his mind spinning. The woman in white. The chilling words. He never saw it coming. The old newspaper clipping. It all clicked into place, sending a shiver down his spine. Sarah's ghost, warning him, protecting him. He looked back at the road, at the treacherous curve where the young couple had met their fate. He thought of the woman's cold hand on his arm, her whispered warning. He shivered, pulling his jacket tighter against the cold. He didn't believe in ghosts, not really, but tonight, something had changed. Tonight, he had seen something he couldn't explain, something both terrifying and strangely comforting. He turned and walked back to the cab, his footsteps heavy in the snow. As he drove away from the clearing, the oak tree silhouetted against the falling snow, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had been given a second chance. A chance he wouldn't soon forget. A chance given to him by a ghost on a night of whispering snow.